All right, welcome back to another episode of the Demand Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Bland, co-founder of Omni Lab, and today I'm joined by Jesse McFarland, who is the director of demand gen at VITAC. Did I say it right? VITAC?
VITAC.
VITAC. I knew I was going to mess it up.
No worries.
I'm probably going to say it. I'm really going to say it wrong a couple other times during the show. Well, cool, man. Well, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, sweet. So like I was saying before we even just got on, I mean, usually for most of the folks that are going to be listening, to try to keep this as kind of practical, tactical as possible. And, some things that maybe they can actually say, hey, let's take this back to the team and potentially implement this if it makes sense or try something out. So I think that's kind of the way we like to roll versus spending too much time talking about how great each other are or anything like that.
Right.
But before we get into any of that, man, I think it'd be great for folks that maybe haven't heard of your company, just about like what you guys do. I know you guys are a captioning company, but maybe just a couple of things there just for a little plug. And then who you guys are marketing to, just for a little bit of context, if we get into anything specific in terms of what you guys are doing on the demand gen front.
Yeah, it's a relatively new job for me. I joined back in October, so I'm actually still learning a lot. But to basically, what we do is closed captioning. So we do captioning for TV networks and streaming podcasts like this, just about everything you can think of. And we were recently, or before I joined, they were acquired by a much smaller company called Verbit, which is more in a startup phase, but growing, really well funded. And they actually acquired VITAC. So the cool thing is VITAC historically has been, captioning has been done manually. So whereas it's been either been typed or has some sort of voice technology where we would actually have a person who's saying the same thing as whoever it is on TV or whoever the speaker is, but they're using a software that understands her voice or his voice, and that's how the captioning works. So it's really interesting to me. And then there's also obviously there's technology for captioning that's just all digital, all AI. So Verbit's more AI, we're more human based, and the human based is really important for accuracy because nothing's more accuracy than a human. And so if you're thinking of like watching something on TV, or if you're thinking of like sports, there's all that noise behind, AI is going to have a hard time picking up when a crowd roars, when there's a touchdown, right? When someone's talking, or if you're thinking of like someone like the president speaking or political, you got to make sure it's right. You don't want an AI to say a cuss word when it wasn't or something like that. So, so there's that world. We believe that world will always exist. So it's really actually interesting for me. But we're in this growth like crazy. The pandemic actually really helped this industry because more people are streaming. There's more stuff like podcasts like we're doing. There's more streaming than ever. So and there's more laws now than ever too about being accessible to people with with loss of hearing and so forth. So it's a really interesting industry. I'm still learning a lot every single day, but it's been a cool journey.
We'll just ask you one question. So, I mean, like the way it works is I would say that we wanted to subtitle or caption this podcast right now. I would say, hey, I can send this to you guys. And then I assume you guys use a combination of some software, AI to initially get the first kind of round done. And then you put humans over top of it to make sure that it's, perfect.
Yeah, we would actually go. The way it works? Yeah, we'd actually go either way, probably, with depending on your on the budget. If it's a podcast, I mean, AI would probably be pretty quick. Would probably be a less expensive way to go, right? And then it's probably going to be mostly accurate or accurate enough for you. But if you really got into like want to publish a small movie for Amazon Prime, then you definitely want something totally accurate, where you would come to us for sure on something like that to make sure it is accurate.
I've definitely had some of those things. I think we've used we've used like Capwing in the past and some other things like that, but we've always got to be careful because we've had a couple of things where there's been some pretty bad words that have been inserted in and we missed them and then post them out to social media and realize later, like, oh shit, like,
Right.
we weren't really trying to say that. Sorry, back it up, re-edit the clip and whatnot. So I think like, that extra layer probably is pretty critical.
Right. Yeah,
and you guys, I imagine the market for you guys is super wide, right? Then, like you're talking, marketers specifically, certainly that are creating a lot of this content, or I guess it really could be just anyone who's.
I think that's been my biggest challenge here is we have so many different markets and personas and so forth. It's like I'm still trying to learn figure them out. I've been mostly focused in media, so that makes it a little bit easier. So like we're looking for like movie producers and stuff like that. But we also have things like podcasts would fit in that realm. People that make video games, that's something that's new. I'm trying to figure that out, that market. There's a lot of fitness apps that do video and so forth. We're trying to figure that out. So there's a lot of newer streaming technologies that I'm still just trying to figure out the audience and the messaging for those. So it's really pretty. Yeah, it's been a crazy learning curve, but we also do stuff like education, legal, all kinds of stuff. So
that's a super good segue. I was going to lead somewhere else, but maybe that's actually something to dig into. So I think that it's interesting because one of the biggest things that at least we talk about with a lot of folks is targeting is always is always one of the most important things, right? And if you're not getting the right message in front of the right audience, it doesn't matter how great your creative is or how great your content is, you're going to miss the mark. So, for you've got an interesting challenge, right? To your point, you've got a super wide audience where you could focus on a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
You, I'm sure, don't have endless capital, endless resources. No one does, right? So you can't necessarily always go after everyone. So how should people think about actually breaking down the target? Should it be breaking those things down into segments and saying, hey, here's where we feel like we've got a better competitive advantage. Let's focus our efforts more on this, where you can drive more marketing dollars into a specific segment. Or is it, do you guys think about, hey, let's start really broad and just kind of see what happens, see who's interacting with some of, whether it be ads or content in general, whatever channels you're posting it on. But how do you guys think about that to actually make sure that, you're spending money in the right ways?
Yeah. I think the first thing you do is you have like some sort of an exercise where it's a brainstorming. If you think of all the possible outlets and channels that we can reach out towards, and then we start to prioritize that way. So we try to figure out like, okay, there's the addressable, the total addressable market. That's one exercise to do, right? But then there's also like where are we currently? VITAC's been around for like 30 plus years. So VITAC has got a really strong brand. So like in networks and broadcasting, you can see on our website with all the networks that we work with, we do pretty well there. So it's not like we can go to these different major networks and it's not like they're not going to know who we are. So that we already have well. So that's something, we already know the messaging there. It's a little bit more account-based marketing because we have sales relationships and so forth. But we're production companies, like we're always looking for, most bigger production companies would know who we are, but smaller producers that are making their first movie or trying to launch a new TV series like on Prime or any one of those type of streaming devices, we really like those type of people. So we really know those type of personas very, very well, and we market to those. So that's like a higher priority for us. And then we look at other things like, okay, where we're not at, but with a lot of potential. So I mentioned podcasts multiple times because podcasts is only growing more and more every single day. So that's like I wouldn't say it's an extreme priority because it's a little bit risk if we dedicate too many resources or we're not sure if we're going to win in like we know we would for production companies. But there's a big TAM total market there that we can. There's money to be made there, so it's definitely worth investing in. So we try to figure out, okay, where are we going to fit that within our marketing campaigns for 2022, and really give it a strong go to see what happens.
Right.
So,
So then, so yeah, just to kind of break down what you said. So you said first, obviously, we got to outline who the TAM is, who are the folks that we actually serve today, which is, I'm sure, a big number.
yeah.
And then from there, then you guys are identifying specific accounts where you say, hey, these are specific production agencies or consultancies or other folks that we want to go after. We know they do a lot of this. They're going to need capturing help.
Right.
So then you've got an account-based strategy. Is it also, do you have a broader kind of demand gen play where you're going after a much broader audience, or do you guys do all account-based?
We definitely do a lot of demand gen. So,
Okay.
yeah, so account-based is definitely a lot smaller. But the demand gen, there's plenty of like producers that we just don't know who they are yet. So that's where demand comes into play. So and yeah, it's just your standard demand generation awareness campaigns and so forth to try to get that traction. The cool thing is, like, I'm had the benefit of joining this company that's been around for 30 years, and they had a strong, you know, brand itself. So like if you're a first time producer or you're doing your own project, but you probably have already worked on multiple other projects before, and there's a good chance that you've already heard of VITAC. So now when you're doing your first stuff or first project yourself, you at least have heard of us already. And you know, so now we're one of your options.
Sure, sure. How many accounts do you guys put in a specific ABM campaign? I think always people are always trying to figure out, like, how many people should be going after, how big should the audience be? I mean, do you guys have thousands of accounts in that, or is it a very, you know, very narrow focus?
It's been,
we want to go after these 100 accounts.
yeah, I can't even answer that question because it hasn't been structured yet. So we're just starting to put a structured one right now. And we're just starting to figure that out, to be honest. We just had one of our first, first meetings on it yesterday. But yeah, up to then, it's been more sales direct. Before I started, it's been more directed by sales and individual sales reps that have been around forever. They've been doing their own type of things and telling marketing what they need. So it just hasn't been organized. So our initiative for basically next quarter is to get this structured and have something that, okay, when we look in our database, what's our ABM segment really? So yeah, so we're just kind of in a process of beginning that.
Does it, I think at least with a lot of like enterprise motions where the ACVs are bigger, which for you guys is ACV pretty big for you all when you start working with a client? Are we talking like 30K plus ACVs, or are we talking much smaller?
It ranges. Yeah, it really does range. We do have a lot of the bigger accounts, but it definitely ranges.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because where I was going with that is that I think, you know, a lot of folks have these, you know, big buying committees. They've got a lot of people they need to influence. I know you've worked at a bunch of different companies and you've been in B2B, B2C, et cetera. So you've kind of seen a lot of different things. But a lot of folks are like, well, hey, we need to influence everyone. The CEO is also there, and the COO and the CFO. And then we need the product people and the engineering people. And it's like, shortly, you're trying to figure out how in the world do we have messages for each of these people that are actually unique?
Yeah.
How do we have the content for any of them that's really going to be truly relevant? Because all of them are going to have little things that are slightly different in terms of like wants, needs, pains, objectives, things like that. So you were mentioning before that you guys narrowed down some of the personas and said, hey, like, let's go after producers. I don't know if that's like the title, but producers specifically. Do you guys, I mean, for you all, or maybe even broadly speaking, it doesn't have to be, you know, for your company specifically, but should you be going after all of these different folks if you've got a larger buying committee? Is that
yeah,
possible?
I mean,
or should you really be like narrowing down and saying, hey, these are our guys, let's serve these?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my last job, my last job was in healthcare and software specifically. So I was there for like, I don't know, 6 years or so. And our buyer would be, if it was a hospital, it would be like, you know, someone on a C level. But the user would be a practitioner or a nurse or something like that. Right. So when we'd try to market to the buyer, but that's like marketing to a thick wall. Whereas the users are the ones that love our software. If they love our software, they're going to tell the people above them that, hey, we need this. We're more efficient because when we use this software. So we would definitely market to the actual user. and then, try to position ourselves to get to the buyer and then close with the buyer. But we were definitely, when we were thinking of like demand generation, a lot of the demand generation was towards the user, to get them on our side.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and
that totally makes sense. Because I mean, it's like those are the people that feel the pain, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the folks that say, hey, I really need a service like you guys. I need someone to actually help me with captioning. So let's make sure we get on their radar. Once they know like, oh, wow, this company kills it.
Yeah.
Now you've got, a ton of brand awareness with that group of people. And to your point, exactly right. This is exactly what we see. Then you've got all that momentum pushing upwards on the manager where they're saying, hey, we've already tried out these guys, or we've heard about them multiple times on whatever channel XYZ. We need to get a conversation going with them. And then they feel that pressure versus just focusing all your energy on decision makers, which so many campaigns that I see, it's like, hey, we just want to go after all the decision makers. We don't want to go after anyone else that actually is going to use the product or that feels the pain from it. I'm like, a huge mistake. And I think what you're saying is spot on.
Right. Yeah. And then the very interesting thing was, we would have those are hospitals, but then, a bigger opportunity is like, smaller clinics. And so clinics are just like businesses. And then all of a sudden our user and our buyer was the same person. And a lot of times if it's smaller, now you're talking about the owner of the business. Right. And so, and then an owner of a business, I don't care if they are a nurse or a physical therapist or a doctor, if they own a business, they're an entrepreneur. So now we're pitching them to say, hey, instead of being more efficient, this is how you can make more money, right?
Exactly.
So our message was always changing, and I was really fascinated by especially because I got to a point where I knew it so well because I was there for 6 years, that I was like, man, I really understand this. I can I could just look at the business and go, okay, I know what our message needs to be exactly for that. And my goal for this company at VITAC is to get like maybe, I don't know, 10% there compared to where I was in healthcare. So, but yeah, so that's, that's, I think, one of the challenges of marketing is you're marketing to people, and no two people are alike, but if they're in a similar type of, I don't know, demographic and a similar type of size, and they do similar things, now you can come up with a similar message that will reach that type of audience. And that's always the challenge for us, right?
That's the key part. If you can find things that are in common, that shared attributes between those people, and you can get a messaging or content that helps them all, obviously that's the better case. If that's not possible and you can't really tie together something and they are very distinct, then you've got to have a different message and content to go after those people.
Right.
But again, the question is, do you have people to actually create that content? And again, with early stage SaaS companies, a lot of them that we work with, they don't have the content to sit here and try to develop out for all these different personas. So it's like, pick one, stay in your lane, own it, and be the master of, creating awesome content that adds value to whoever these people are. And then add to that once you actually have the resources.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's not
easy. I wanted to shift because no, it's not easy at all. It's hard as crap. I mean, that, and then you've got, people that are coming into the companies that don't have a lot of experience with working with that market or that customer, which I think is probably the most important thing for these guys, right? And if you don't have that background, then you're coming in trying to figure out, oh shit, I need to really get deep into really understanding who these guys are, because you're going to not have any chance in trying to create a message that's going to resonate with these folks that's in the language that they're in,
right.
The language that the buyer uses. That I wanted to switch gears. So the post I was going to start with, actually, so you posted, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago or something, but you had said what a lot of marketers are thinking about in 2022 was a lot of things on give me more leads and what lead gen campaign can I come out with? And then you had a point where you said, hey, here's what they should be thinking about.
Right.
I think you said something like, you really need to be thinking a lot more about brand marketing. And I think it's interesting what you're saying, because I think that a lot of people would agree with you that there needs to be far more investment in brand marketing. I don't think any marketer would disagree with you on that front. But then all marketers are dealing with the issues of, short-term goals and trying to generate leads quick, right? So it's like, yeah, we want to do the brand marketing thing, but then it's also like, how do we attribute it? And there's not as many short-term things that we can generate out of that campaign. So I'd be kind of curious, maybe this is just always one of those like highly debated things. Maybe we can dive into your post here, but before we do that, like the difference is like, are lead gen and demand gen two separate things in your mind? Is demand gen an umbrella over the whole thing? Like in your mind, like what are the differences or pros and cons between lead gen and demand gen as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's definitely different definitions, but I don't think there's an actual, I don't know, maybe I should look it on Wikipedia and see what Wikipedia says, what the difference is between the two. But
you probably see multiple definitions even.
But that's the thing, like,
this or,
yeah,
yeah.
I just don't know what the actual definition is, but I can tell you what I think it is, and we can just kind of go from there.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah, so lead generation is definitely more of that small term, right? Of like, we're trying to get some sort of quick wins to feed directly to our sales pipeline. So our whatever process that you have sales development reps or any type of salespeople that handle those, and then they'll try to turn them into something, right? So that's very focused. But to generate leads, you got to have something above that, right? So it's not like I can just go to I've just met you. Obviously we've met. Let's pretend like we've never seen each other on LinkedIn before, and this is the first time I'm bumping into you. Now, if I'm trying to sell you something right from our very first conversation, first time you ever seen me, that's a challenge, right? And to me, that's closer to lead generation. Whereas demand generation would be a little bit more of, you've seen my posts on LinkedIn, I've seen your posts on LinkedIn, or some sort of branding awareness, some sort of trust that we've built, even though we've never really met each other, and now we're talking to each other, right? Now, if I were to try to sell you something, that's a little bit closer to demand generation, as maybe I've convinced you that there's a little bit more demand of whatever it is I'm trying to deliver.
Right.
So to me, those are the separate things. I don't know if I explained that very well, but that's really what I try to. I do this every single year. Like when I'm talking to like leaders at my company, it's like this. By the way, stop asking me how many leads we're getting. I'm going to tell you in our pipeline meetings. But here's the rest of the story, and this is the rest of the story that you need to understand. And I do it all the time. I've actually gotten pretty decent at it of showing the story that we're not just trying to generate leads. Yes, that's one KPI out of a lot of things. But here's all the other stuff that we're trying to do so we can not only deliver and meet our pipeline goals this week, this month, this quarter, but I'm trying to meet our growth plan for the rest of the year and 5 years down the road. So to me, that's where demand generation really makes that difference. It's more of a bigger picture. And longer term goal, I think.
I think you nailed it. Yeah, I would say something similar. And there's definitely not two definitions or that are the same with lead gen and demand gen. Everyone's got their opinion on it. I mean, for me, I kind of think of demand gen as more of umbrella, and there's all sorts of tactics and things you do. Some people call ABM a totally separate thing. Yeah. ABM to me is just a strategy and tactic underneath doing demand gen. It's just saying, hey, I'm going to get a set of target accounts. I'm going to develop certain messaging and or content and deliver it to those accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Right. It's really it at the end of the day, not to make it overcomplicated as many MarTech vendors tend to do. But well, what's the reason then? I mean, because I mean, you can go through your LinkedIn feed or Facebook feed, and I'm sure you see it. Like everyone, I mean, I would say, and I was actually going to do this the other day, just literally go down about 1,000 ads and just see what they were doing. But I just know intuitively just from going through the news feed and seeing, the feed and seeing what's there. But majority of people are still trying to capture a lead right off the platform, whether it's, native lead gen forms, et cetera. Very few that I see, at least that I'm being targeted on, very few are using any type of like brand marketing or opening up the content, allowing me to kind of explore it, whether that be just ungated, sending me to the website, or even telling the story within the channel itself, and not necessarily trying to get me to click and go off platform. Right? They're actually saying, hey, here's the message, here's the content. I think Gong's done a good job of this a little bit, but what do you think the reason is that companies struggle to spend more on brand marketing, given these short-term goals? There's some things that like you guys talk about even internally when you're having that conversation, and they're like, hey, we want leads, Jesse, we want leads. And you're like, yeah, well, hey, the leads are great too. We need leads for pipeline and revenue, but at the same token, we're not going to be able to hit our goals. I mean, how does that conversation go when you
Yeah.
get them sold on spending more on brand? I think that's very challenging.
I think why that exists is just the pressure of for most marketers is your boss or whoever, your leadership team or whatever that is, they want to see a return, and a return, the most common return for a marketer is to say, okay, leads, and I think that's what it's turned into. It's probably, it wasn't always that way, but I think in the modern world in like digital marketing, it's pretty regular that it's leads, where they can push on sales. Like, okay, if it's a junior sales development rep, you can say, how many demos did you get, or how many,
Right.
whatever. And then for your account executives or your leads, it's how many wins do they get, right? Or and so forth. So every single person within, or every single type of whatever position has their ROI or direct return that your ultimate leaders, whether you're a CEO or your chief revenue officer or whoever is in charge of your revenue, they can understand and make it very simple and go, okay, these are my demands. And once the marketers hit their lead goal, and then your development reps hit their demo goal, and then you have your AEs hit their quota as far as close wins, and you have some sort of like this many leads, which I know this is podcast, but I have my hands really wide and a little bit narrow. You got to need this many demos, and then a lot narrow, more demos, this many closed deals. That's you could type of measure that, and so it's just pressure from leadership. But I think it's really tough as a marketer, especially if you're an experienced marketer, that that leads is not the only thing, and you can't just go directly. So I think it's your responsibility to help convince your leadership that there's a lot more to that. Leads, again, is just one KPI, right? It's an important one. We get that, but there's so much other shit that involves with leads that allows us to be successful, and that's really the most important thing. I heard on I think it was Refine Labs. I was listening to one of their podcasts a couple weeks ago, and it's something that stuck with me. They said, like, demand generation is like when someone calls you and calls you directly and says, hey, I want to do business with you. And that means they've seen your brand all over the place. They've read your material, and the first call that they have to you is exactly like that. I mean, that's definitely a dream, right? But that's kind of like the goal, is someone that's seen your brand so much, they built that trust, they're just going to go in and buy it from you. It's kind of like if you're if you're, I don't know, something that's a little bit less expensive and more common would be like if you were just landed in America for the first time and you're watching TV, you're probably at some point going to go to a 7-Eleven and buy a Coca-Cola for the very first time, right? Because you've seen it everywhere. Everyone says it's awesome, and then you're like, wow, I better go try it. So it's kind of a similar situation there.
Oh, totally. No, I think that's the 100% the goal. We want to see overall more people, percent-wise, more people coming in to want to talk to us and say, hey, I'm ready to go. More of the high intent leads that are ready to talk to sales, not necessarily a whole bunch of low intent people that downloaded something or went to an event. We want people that are saying like, no, I've seen enough. You guys have put out an amazing content or whatever they say, or your podcast was awesome, or I learned a lot on it, or whatever it may be. I'm ready. I want to kind of go in there, and you'll of course see those conversion rates much better through the funnel. But going back to what you said, I was just scribbling down some notes here. What do you like specifically say though for you? I mean, what do you say to, because to your point, you were saying that lead gen, everyone wants to kind of put a nickel in and get 3 out. And brand marketing types of campaigns are not necessarily that way. A lot of them are longer term. So, what do you say specifically to someone and say, hey, we need to start shifting more of our budget to lead gen to brand marketing? How does that conversation go? And then I think the second question to that you were kind of keying off of is like, ultimately, how do you measure it, right? Because that's going to be the next question. Is they're going to say, okay, well, yeah, we have this marketing math kind of thing built out, and we need this amount of leads, this amount of pipeline. How does this fit in if we're going to allocate another $50,000 a month or whatever it may be? to this brand type of building stuff, how do we know if it's working? Like, what would you,
That's a
how
tough
do you approach that? I mean, it's a tough one, right? So I don't know if there's a good answer, but
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many ways to answer that, but I think the most important thing is like you can't be afraid to like totally lose and fall on your face, because there's a chance that that's going to happen, right? So like I'm in this situation now. Is like, okay, we have all these sub verticals. We have like, I don't know, we have like 10 sub verticals I'm focusing on right now, and like 3 or 4 where we know what to do there. We know what to do for demand generation. We're good. And now we have all these like maybe 5 or 6 or more that are where it's a little bit more unknown. It's going to require some testing, and it's definitely going to require some branding. So
totally.
I have to figure out, okay, how can I balance these, take some of the budget that might mean less, I don't know, some less leads from the 3 known ones, or less business from those, and try out some of these. So I have to, out of those 6 or 7, or I don't know, 5 or 6 verticals, break them out in segments. I'm not going to do them all at once. That's suicide. But maybe 1 or 2 this quarter, 1 or 2 next quarter. And I don't even know if a quarter is enough to at least start with it, but that's what I'm going to try, and see what we can do there. But before I do, I'm presenting a story to our leadership and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why I think these verticals are super important for us in the long run. It's not going to help us win this quarter. It's not. It's going to help us win at the end of the year, right? So I have to really do a good job on presenting that to our leadership team and get them to buy in on it, so that I know that when I, that we, I'm trying to save my butt too, just make sure that they understand that we're sacrificing a little bit of our pipeline budget to explore these other areas. But
what's just to interrupt you, because I'm curious, because I mean, when you have that conversation, I totally get it. You got to tell a story, and clearly there's going to be some things that are not trackable, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of like, what questions do they typically ask when you're in that conversation? How should you prepare for that, right? Because you know that there's going to be like the typical things, but what are some of those things that they typically ask you? Like, oh yeah, Jesse, like I get it, but, and then they have a question. What are those?
How much and when is I think if you have, I think if you have a good leadership, that's what they ask. And I think that's the most common thing you're going to get anyway, right? Is how much and when, right? So how much money do you have right now, and when am I going to see this return? So you really have to show like, hey, this is what, so you have to, before you even have that meeting, you already have to have that answer is super clear in your presentation or whatever your story all ready to go. And it could be that it's not a guarantee, right? So you have to really explain that. And what you're really trying to do is say, hey, this is what, this is going to be how much it is. And then this is when it's returned. But my job is, when I'm telling that story, is to get them to sign off on it. So if it doesn't happen, it's not just me, it's everyone that was part of that conversation is
everyone was on board.
Everyone's on board, right? So, and at the same time is if it wins and we're awesome, it was not just my decision, it was everyone. So that's the best way to do it. What you don't want to do is just start doing it without buy-in from your leadership, right? That's not a good idea. That's pretty ballsy, but it's probably not a good idea.
Totally.
But if you want to have, if you do go to leadership, which you should, you want to make sure that you have the answers to those 2 questions. If you do you
totally? No, I think you nailed it. Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things too, do you break it down in the presentation, say, hey, these are the types of campaigns we want to run month over month? You break it down that much, or is it more high level and strategic and saying, hey, overall, these are some of the things we want to accomplish, but then we're not really saying this is what we do month 1, month 2, or do you think about it like that? How do you?
Yeah, it really depends on who your audience is. So if you're trying to get buy-in from the higher up, the more like big picture it needs to be, right? So if it's like your CEO that you're trying to convince to, then you do not go into campaign level. I mean, unless they're super detailed and they're interested in marketing. No, if that's the case, then sure. But if for most cases, I don't think that will be the situation. So you just need to keep it like, hey, this is what I plan on doing. this is why, and this is when I hope or expect to see some sort of return. And so to keep it simpler. Now, if you have like a VP of marketing, or if you need other marketing peers to buy off for that reason, now you get into more of the campaign level and so forth to get their buy-in. And now your KPIs kind of expand to more like, okay, we need, possibly could be like, we need this much website traffic, we need this many, I don't know, contacts in our database. To now you're starting to get more into the details. But yeah, it really depends on your audience.
I think just to highlight, the best thing you said there is know your audience. And it's so funny, like that's a skill all marketers should know in and out.
Yeah.
And when you show up to the meeting with that CEO or whoever whoever your boss is, whoever you have to sell this story to, you've got to make sure to understand if they have a background in marketing, then fair. Maybe you can speak in some of the typical language that you do, but if they don't have a background in marketing, then you've got to simplify it. And you can't use a whole bunch of metrics that they're not going to understand and start talking about impression share and click-through rate and all this other stuff. Like, they're not going to get it. They're not going to want to hear about it.
Right.
There's only a handful of metrics that they really care about moving in the business. So it's aligning with those metrics that they care about, that they're thinking about every day, and making sure you just kill all the buzzword crap. And to your point, like if campaigns, like they're not going to want to know, all right, we're going to do this specific conversion campaign and it's going to have this objective and this is going to be the creative. It's like, no, too much. Like they don't have time to work with that. So I think just like knowing your audience when you develop creative for your actual target market that you're trying to sell to, same is true for knowing your CEO or knowing your COO and how do they think about these things and what's important to them.
Right. Yeah, that's 100% right. So it's like, for me, I've taken my marketing skills from, just how I present to my own leadership. I'm trying to sell something to my leadership team on a marketing strategy. so yeah,
right, exactly.
I just, and I think that's what you need to do, especially if you're trying to try something new. I think a benefit that I had is I most of my career I've been in some sort of agency world where I've had more than one. When you're marketing for customers, you have lots of customers, so it's a lot of different marketing campaigns and a lot of different stories that you got to tell to either get them to buy or to keep them a customer. So when you've done a million stories and then you've fallen on your face thousands of times and then you've won a few, like you start to figure out like, oh, okay, now I know how to get something approved and how I get something to move forward. Because marketing takes time, and usually people expect an instant return, even the most patient people expect an instant return. And it's up to you as the marketing person to get them to be patient and really get them to understand like this is not something we're going to win overnight, for most cases.
I love it. You said it well. Well, cool, man. Well, let's wrap up. Any questions for me before we sign off?
One thing I would like to do a little shout out for, if you don't mind, is I actually have a podcast myself.
Nice, totally do it.
Yeah, it's the Brands and Brews Marketing Podcast. Myself and another marketing expert. His name is Kirill. We basically, what the premise is it's a lot more casual. It's more of an after hours type of deal where we talk about marketing. And we drink beer while we talk, and so it's fun. Awesome. We have a theme almost every episode. We always talk to entry level or people that want to get into marketing. So we talk about everything about marketing, but we always have a segment on advice for entry level type of people to get, how to get into it, how you get your first job, and so forth. But it's a good show. So if you're interested in being on
critical.
It, let me know.
I love it. And I mean, there's so many marketers that we need, right? So and there's a lot of folks that want to get into it. So I think that's super smart because there's a lot of folks that want to learn and want to pick it up. And frankly, a lot of this can't be taught in school, right? A lot of it's not being taught in school. So demand gen, I didn't have a demand gen class. We never really talked about it. We talked about the 4 Ps,
right?
And a couple of other things. So well, good stuff, man. Well, definitely enjoyed it. And I guess before we sign off, any people you'd recommend to have on the podcast next? Any marketers that you respect that work for other B2B SaaS companies that you can think of?
Yeah, I'll send you a list of some people I think that'd be great. And
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'll just follow up that way.
Sweet, man. All right, dude. Well, until the next time.
Thanks.
All right, man. Cheers.
Cheers.